everyone. Welcome back to Chats with Kat on the A Voice of Adoptees podcast. I am your host, Kat. I hope everyone's having a great week so far. Don't forget to grab your coffee or a preferred beverage and settle on in. I'm currently here with Masha, who's returning to give us an update about her adoption story. Masha, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So talk about where you left off last time you interviewed.
Yes. So I interviewed in season 1 with David, and like most other interviews, I gave, general background of my entire adoption. I was adopted from Russia. As a refresher, I became a U.S. citizen in 1993, and I've lived in America the rest of my life, in Maryland specifically. So, I was just informing him of kind of my upbringing and how that all went and my adoption story for everything that I knew. And a lot of what I spoke about in season 1 was the lack of information that I had, I guess. I, had really very little information about my adoption and my documentation.
So that's to say that it was probably a closed door adoption, right?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay. So what have you found out? How did you go about finding it? Like, talk to us about the process and talk to us about your results.
Sure. So yes, since this is why I'm coming back, I have actually found a lot of information and a lot more than I ever would have expected to find. And so I honestly feel like my story is almost now complete, which is kind of nice. So we'll break it down in 3 parts. So the first part is I found my naturalization records, or I received my naturalization records, I should say. I knew that I was naturalized growing up, but I only recently, somehow, light bulb moment, came to discover that, oh, wait, I don't actually have my naturalization records, even though I know I was naturalized. So wait, those documents must be out there somewhere. So I filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and I received some results, which was great. So I received 3 pieces of paper, with all copies, of course, unfortunately. But one piece was the alien immigration visa and alien registration application that my parents had filled out. The other document was a copy of my Russian passport, which is very interesting because it was completely Americanized. So it's the Russian passport. It looks like the Russian passport, but everything on it was, I'm pretty sure, falsified, and it's written as my American self, not my Russian born, heritage, history. So the other documentation was the actual certificate of my citizenship into the United States.
Okay, so that's a lot to unpack. Let's unpack each one. So for those who don't know what the first document is or what that means, can you explain it for us a little bit?
Sure. So I don't have a lot of detail about it because it was just a single sheet, but it looks like it was the application that my parents had to fill out in order to help further the adoption, I'm presuming, to get me into the United States. It was again, the alien registration application. So I guess that was to help make me a U.S. citizen.
So it's like the green card, you mean?
Yes.
Basically. Okay, so basically alien form, green card, same layer, they're interchangeable. Because for me, I'm like, wait, what is this form? I don't remember this form. My experience was like a green card. Okay, so green card done. And you were able to see all of the information on that. And that was basically, like you said, your parents were just trying to secure like you coming over to the US sort of, right? Saying like she's allowed to be here, like things like that.
A US citizen.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So then walk me through the next step. The next step is...
So did you want to hear about the Russian passport copy or the next set of documents I found?
Well, I feel like, okay, so I feel like there's a lot of information that was just kind of like thrown. And I want to unpack all of the information in the order in which you kind of like discussed it. So, you know what I mean? Because many of us who are adopted, we eventually get to a point where if we are fortunate enough to look through forms or to find papers like that, it kind of seems like a mess. So I feel that this sort of process that you've gone through can shed a lot of light on that. So you found like alienation documentation or, the green card basically. Then you also found a copy of your Russian passport. I think that was the next thing that you had mentioned, right? And you were saying that it's Americanized. So that leads me to assume you don't have the original copy.
Yes, unfortunately.
Right?
So again, all of this was, since it's coming from the government, right? All of this was photocopied. So it was just a single photocopy of, the part where it lists your personal information, your picture. And again, it is
Mhm.
the Russian passport, but everything on it was Americanized. So it says my American name. I know my birth date was changed, so it has that new birth date, has my parents' names on it. It says I was born in Russia
Mhm.
and the area in Russia, St. Petersburg. But again, I know it was Americanized because my American now legal name was used on that document. So I'm like, that seems very interesting. So it leads me to believe that,
Mhm.
it was clearly falsified. And unfortunately, I have never had possession of my original Russian passport, and I really wish I did.
So, like, okay, again, unpacking that because that's a lot. And it's something that's kind of foreign to me because I actually have my original Russian passport where it actually has my Russian last name on it and it's written in Russian. So I'm trying to understand fully, and I want everyone else to kind of understand fully. I'm sure there's a lot of adoptees who are also in your situation where they've done research, they've obtained the Freedom of Information through the Freedom of Information Act, and they've researched this stuff, and they're kind of there's this sort of disconnect where, wait a minute, this is my American passport, but I was looking for my Russian one. So I just want to, so it's literally like it says your name and then it says your American last name. It doesn't say your Russian last name at
No,
all.
it's not even my Russian name that's on the document. It literally is my American name. So Maria Yelena Berg, which is my maiden name, that is what it says on the copy of the document. So again,
Yeah,
everything that was
that's
truly
wild.
Russian was taken out, and I'm pretty sure all that was
Right.
finagled to help get me into the country.
Yeah, I see. Like, to me, that's just wild. I mean, I can't believe that's kind of like allowed, because obviously, like you said, it's a falsified document. So, I guess, Russia was very different at that time. But okay, so you've found your passport or the American copy of the Russian passport that has been falsified, and it's not your original name. Do you know your original Russian name? I assume you do.
Yes, I do. Thankfully, via other documentation I've received, I do know my full Russian family name.
Oh, good. Okay. So after you found this passport, what was the next thing that you had
Yeah.
found?
So after I found the naturalization records and I received those, the next set of information that I received was actually information about my biological family. And
Oh my God.
interestingly enough, literally 2 days after interviewing with David, so this was all David was the impetus for this happening. I He sent me via email documents pertaining to like my family members, like just names, birth dates, their place of origin, whether they're alive or deceased. So like I literally now know after 30 plus years who my family members are, like my most immediate family members. So that's
Yeah.
really amazing, and I'm so excited about that.
Okay, so tell me about it. Tell me about what you found.
Sure.
Like, if you want to
Yeah,
share,
I'll just give
if you
first
want to share the
names.
information,
I
like,
mean, I think at this point
yeah.
there's nothing would happen if I gave full names, but my mom, so this is what I know. My mom is alive. Again,
Mhm.
I take this all with a little bit of grain of salt. I want to believe that this
Okay.
is all 100% true. But according to these documents,
Right.
my mother is alive, and her name is Elena. My father has passed. His name was Boris. And my sister had an older sister. Unfortunately, very sadly, she's also passed away. I would have loved to have met her. And her name was Yulia. So, like Americanized, it would be Julia. And our last name was Yuna. So, and I also know apparently my sister was married, and I have two nephews out there somewhere.
Oh my God. Sorry. I think that's so big because so obviously like one of the struggles of being adopted is not knowing your family, not knowing where you come from. I mean, so you found this document that had all of this information in it. Were you able to find like pictures and things like that? Sometimes we wonder like, who do I look like? Where do I get this from? Like, sort of deal. Were you able to find any of that sort of stuff?
So, unfortunately, no. That is the one piece of
No.
information that doesn't make me feel like my story is complete, aside from actually seeing
Okay.
and physically meeting my family members, which we can talk about in a few minutes. But at this
Mhm.
point, I have no picture. So, yes, I wonder that constantly, like, oh, especially where did I get my red hair? Because I'm pretty sure red hair is not common in Russia. I've done my DNA ancestry. I'm definitely 100% mostly Russian. Have a little bit of Finnish, which is cool. Apparently, I'm 6% Finnish, so I
Ooh.
must have ancestry heritage from Finland, which is awesome. Maybe that's where my red hair derives, I don't know. But, yeah, I've wondered what my family members look like, and I unfortunately have no photographs. So that's my next search is what do my family members look like and how can I obtain pictures?
I mean, so obviously finding this information, like what was your immediate reaction?
I was a lot of emotions, I guess. I was shocked. I was in disbelief to some extent. I was, I guess, to put a word to it, I was just like, whoa, right? Like almost speechless in a way. Excited, amazed. I
Mm.
don't know. Put all the adjectives with it.
Oh my God, I'm so excited for you. And so again, a lot of adoptees, like going through life in general, they have this sort of, it's not really, the way that it was always described to me by like my adoptive mom naturally was like it's a chip on your shoulder. There's certain things that come with the territory of being adopted, and I'm wondering if you experience any of that, and how obviously finding your this information, all of this information, has helped you either heal, move forward, things like that.
Yes, for sure, definitely. Uh, so interestingly enough, I think I had this thought the other day, in fact. I realized that I was at a young age, I was told that I was adopted, but for some reason, I don't think I was ever told why, and then from there, I never actually I never, like, made any action, I never took any action to figure out why. So I did kind of that kind of dawned on me the other day that I didn't actually know why I was placed for adoption and why I came into an American family. I was just told that I was adopted from Russia. Again, I had very limited knowledge of my story. But yeah, it's a relief. It's so nice to know now, again, after 30 plus years, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this information exists. It was out there somewhere. And now I finally have it in my possession. So that feels really good.
Right. And I know you mentioned that you want to meet your biological family. Like, I'm assuming that you know where your nephews are and things like that, and around about maybe the area that like your biological mom is. I think based off of like what you're telling me, it's an assumption, but so talk to me about like just a little bit about like what kind of trip you would take, or talk to me about that.
Okay, so and this can kind of lead into the third set of documents I found, but I actually do know now why I was placed for adoption. And kind of knowing that information, I'm actually, admittedly, I'm not as ready or as comfortable really actively trying to search for my biological family. Again, I still maintain that it would be extremely difficult and costly and just that the
Right.
logistical side of it being in Russia and I'm in the States and obviously, the whole relationship between our
Right.
two countries and the fact that they,
Right.
pretty much have cut off adoption from us. So all of that
Mhm.
logistically, I think would make it extremely hard. And yeah, that doesn't stop some people, but I don't know. At this point, I don't feel pressed to physically find my family. Let me say, especially knowing that
Mhm.
my sister and my dad have passed. That's that really stinks, and that's
Right.
not fun to hear. But knowing kind of what my mom has been through and kind of knowing now a little more detail about who my mom was, I'm actually not really interested in looking for her. Like I feel at peace knowing that she's out there and the only thing I would love for her to know is that her second daughter is alive and well, but I don't feel like I need to meet her. Not even sure if I want to meet my nephews. I don't know. I'm still like, it's whatever.
Mhm.
I'm kind of indifferent about it, I guess.
Yeah, see, like that's every adoptee that I speak to, whether it's on here, whether it's just in real life, everyone wants to find their family. And then you bring up a very valid point where sometimes when we do find our family and we do see what life probably could have been like, it's something that maybe we think about at some point in our life as an adoptee, like what would have happened if I stayed in Russia. And sometimes it's there's this whole hype about finding your family and like wanting to know and things like that. And then sometimes it's kind of like there's this truth in the reality of like finding out what your biological family may or may not have been like. And it's not always positive, and I think I appreciate what you're saying about, I found out, I understand that this is what my life would have been like. And I don't want to press it further. And I think it's important for adoptees to know that that's an okay stance to take. It's the fact that you feel whole knowing that you know this information, and you're okay with, oh, I don't really want to maybe connect. I think that's really brave. And I think, for the inside of you. I'm happy that it makes you feel more whole in general. So let's talk about the third set of documents that you have found, which I'm also very excited for. So take us through that. Let's get into it.
Sure. So the third set, so after finding the naturalization records and then also receiving the family information from David, I was able to compile all of that information, and I filed another Freedom of Information Act request because I had been trying for a little bit to file some of those requests, but I was unsuccessful. I wasn't receiving information. It was because of the lack of information that I had, right? So I finally was like, oh, I think I have enough information now. Let me try again. So I'm glad I was persistent in trying that and I didn't give up. So luckily that yielded also a whole new set of results I truly wasn't expecting. It was like 19 pages of documents, much of it in Russian, unfortunately. So I can't read it, but I think it looks like a lot of it is certificates it looks like a lot of it is certificates. But then included with that also, which to me was more surprising and more like, whoa, and wow, was the adoption decree that my parents had filled out, or like the statement of my adoption decree, my adoption certificate. So like just basically those documents saying like, yes, these American parents are now taking this child as their own, and her birthday will be this, and she's going to live in this country. So that was pretty amazing to see because I've never seen documents like that, right? I felt like I was getting a glimpse into the actual legal process of the transfer of a child from one country to another and how does that actually look on paper. So that was really cool. And my mom was a lawyer, remember? So she's the one who facilitated my adoption from her adoption agency. So she was adopting many children from Russia, Ukraine, and neighboring countries. So it makes more sense now that my documents were falsified. I'm sure she played a big role in that. But I got the adoption, transference paperwork. And then the other big thing that was really new and surprising to me was I received a court document, and only part of it was translated in English, but the court document from Russia pretty much explains why I was given up for adoption. And basically, to put it simply, my parents were not fit to be parents. They lost custody of me and my sister, which is really sad.
Yeah. So I'm really happy that you found these documents. Again, it just adds an element to healing for you. And it's like you said, I feel like you can move on kind of more, even more so with your life than you had already been doing. So something I think is very interesting is the court documents where, for lack of for basically in short, you're saying that, your parents were deemed unfit. But do the court documents go into like explicit detail about why they were unfit? You don't have to necessarily say why, but do they go into detail? Like how detailed are the documents for you?
Yes, there is detail given to explain why I was placed for adoption.
Okay. So I think it's something to note for me because my parents fortunately kept all of those documents, which I didn't find until quite recently. Something I think is very interesting is, like you said, kind of like the wording and how like figuring out and finding out how and why you were basically either given up, taken away, or how your parents like had their rights basically removed. And like, what was your feeling for that? For me, it's kind of just, I don't know if I like believed the documents necessarily. For me, I was very skeptical, where I'm just like, is that how much of this is actually true, right? So what was your thoughts like when you read it? Did you believe it completely? Did you kind of take it with a grain of salt?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I probably share some of the same sentiment as you. I 100% want to totally believe that it's 100% true. And I think for the most part I do, but I do also think maybe there's that 1% chance where like, I will never know, I guess is the point, right? Like it is an official court document, so that makes me pretty that gives me comfort in knowing that, okay, I think this is pretty legitimate and this wasn't just made up, right? Like people don't make up court documents, I don't think. But yeah, knowing the information that was written about why my parents lost their custody, that made me pretty mad, angry, I guess, is the feeling I feel. But I'm also now relieved, and I'm glad to know that while it's very sad, clearly, that I'm glad that I was given up for adoption. Clearly, you know, the right thing was done, right, in that situation. And thankfully, my adoptive American parents came along and recognized that and were able to scoop me up.
Yeah, and so now it's kind of like you have a totally different life. I mean, did you ever wonder, like, what your life would have been like in Russia if you had stayed, if you had not been adopted? Did you ever do
I
that?
wondered just a little bit. I really didn't think much about it.
Mhm.
I think that maybe, I would have now well, I guess now knowing the situation, I would have remained in probably pretty poor care, maybe an abusive home possibly, I don't know. I think more so than not, it would have been a negative experience. So, again, I'm really glad I got out of that situation, and also to that point, knowing what I know about why my parents lost their custody, I had never known that my whole life, right? Like I said, I didn't know why I was given up for adoption. So now that I know that information, and by the way, both of my adoptive parents are deceased. So I think it's interesting that I've learned all of this information since the passing of both of my adoptive parents. But I feel kind of relieved and feeling okay that I know that information and I won't feel guilty knowing that information that because that like they would find out. Because I'll admit my mom was not very supportive in me. Again, she was hiding a lot. I felt like she was hiding a lot and not revealing things to me as I grew up and purposefully not telling me things. But now I realize I
Mhm.
think she was probably protecting me. She had to have known that information upon my adoption. So now that I know that, like,
Right.
I feel better. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe she was doing a very noble thing and it was good that she was purposefully not telling me these things in order to, in a way, protect me.
Right, and it's interesting because it's also that way for me where after my adoptive parents died, both of them, I too found all of this information. I've come to the same conclusion where it's like, my parents were just trying to protect me and like doing what they thought you know what I mean? It's something that I think a lot of adoptees have a misconception about where adoptive parents kind of hide information. Maybe it's kind of seen as like a very negative thing, and then perhaps one day, like, all of these things will kind of come to light. And again, using the Freedom of Information Act, you can request documents, you can request findings. And I actually, you know what, let's talk about that. How did you go about doing that? Did you know like what to request? Did you just kind of put like a general statement out there? Like, how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, sure. I can explain that process. So it's really easy, and I think they've even changed their system to where you can do it online versus having to fill out an application. Because I think you used to fill out an application, have to send that in, but now it's actually really easy. And I'll admit I don't have it up in front of me, so I don't recall the exact information they want. But I think at a most basic level, they want your name, like the adoptee's name. They want your parents' names, I think a birth date, and maybe social security number. I'm not sure, but very basic information that anybody would know about themselves. And then from there, I just said, I'm requesting all naturalization records. Or later on, I said, I am requesting all paperwork and documentation pertaining to my adoption. And that's when I received paperwork back.
I mean, I think that's amazing that they were able to find this information. You know what I mean? It's obviously something that we just don't have access to. And maybe it's because it's hidden behind like court documents, and there's a bunch of legal processes that the government has to kind of go through, the hoops to jump through that maybe just regular people can't necessarily access.
Right. So the only thing that made me kind of, I guess, frustrated in my particular case about that actually is so I'm so happy and glad I was able to retrieve this information through the FIOA request. But remember, I said my mom was the lawyer who ran my adoption, who facilitated this adoption. So everyone asks and everyone believes, like, wait, you should already have this documentation. You should have your Russian passport. You should have this and that and the other. I'm like, yeah, but I don't. So I wonder, why didn't my mom give me any of this documentation, right? Did she burn it all? Did she shred it all? Like, why didn't she, at least when I came of age or later, why didn't I receive this documentation? Like, that's the most baffling part to me at this point is I had to search to find this information when really I should have received all of this information from my own mother.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I was actually thinking that. But again, I think she had her reasons that she didn't want to necessarily have you find out? I mean, again, perhaps maybe she felt that you just weren't ready. And then for me, I think that things happen during the times that we are ready. You know what I mean? When we're ready to kind of like confront things or deal with things, this is when different opportunities or different things from the past kind of come unburied for us. And,
Right. And again, it's
but
interesting that all of this has come since their passing. So, like I said, I'm kind of relieved that I know all this information now and I don't have to tell my mom about her, have her secretly find out, because again, I don't think she would be happy about me finding out this information, as hard as it is to believe and to say. She was supportive of me going back to Russia. Like, she had no issue with that, and she did support like a trip to Russia, but pretty sure 99.9% she would not have wanted me finding out the documentation information.
I mean, yeah, definitely that, but also, do you think so if you said like, "Mom, I wanna go to Russia and, like, meet my biological family," do you think she would be supportive of that?
Probably not. Or she would have given me some lie to say,
Yeah.
"Oh, they don't live, like, they're all dead. They don't exist," or, "Oh, I don't know how to do that," or, "We can't figure that out." I feel like she would have made an excuse or some lie about why I wouldn't be able to find my biological family.
Right, so, like, when you did you feel betrayed at all, like, during this whole process that you're getting this stuff back and you're just like, "What the F, mom?" Like, did you feel betrayed at all ever at any point by her?
Only within maybe the last 5 years did I really start kinda questioning why I didn't have any information. And now, since having been part of this podcast and since having been part of the Russian Adoptees Facebook group, it just seems so easy, I guess. And it was available for other people to find their families and have documentation. And so yeah, like you said, I've questioned why I had not received any of this information. Again, I came in with one medical document that was translated. So thank God I knew my Russian name at least and my birth date, which was again also fudged. But yeah, it was just more like, wow, really? Like, why did she do this? Why didn't she give me this information? I did feel a little deceived and lied to, and I felt a little hurt by that. But again, I can understand the whole, okay, she didn't tell me why I was placed for adoption. I think that part she was protecting me, but I'm not really sure then why the rest of the documentation was never released to me.
Right. I mean, again, all of those thoughts and feelings are very valid, and it's something that each adoptee kind of goes through. Whether it's like you feel like your parents are hiding information from you, or years later when you find all this stuff and you're kind of just like, what the f, you know what I mean? So okay, so how do you feel like the Freedom of Information Act like obviously helps adoptees. They can request documentation. So what is your perspective of it? I mean, you had a difficult time with it.
Yeah, it was a little
So,
bit of a struggle. I would say, I guess my advice would be, again, it's easy to fill in the online portion and to request information, but I guess just be aware that you're probably not going to receive the information you're looking for if you don't have at least a basis or a very basic start of other information. I know that sounds kind of general, but again, like I said, once I had my naturalization records and the passport copy, then I knew, okay, this should be enough information for me to move forward and request further information, because I requested the same type of information when I first did it. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. I said,
right,
all documents and records pertaining to my adoption. Nothing came back. So I was like, oh man, right?
right,
So once, again, you need something to get you started, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And that should hopefully help you in your search and getting more documentation. Moving forward, I don't know if there's anything else I need to get or if there's anything else to get. So I think my search in terms of actual paperwork is complete.
right. So, I mean, also just putting that out there, for adoptees who are listening to this or watching this and you're thinking of using the Freedom of Information Act, if you don't get anything back the first time, try again. Don't give up. Try again. Try a couple of times because maybe one of those times something will come back. It may take some time for them to find the information, but don't give up on it. So I had a I had a question in terms of like healing. So your older self, what would you now say or let I guess like notify or I don't know. So what would you say to your younger self who was kind of who didn't know any of this information, who as you were like going through life and maybe you were thinking about it or wondering about it, what would you say to the younger version of yourself now?
I think to my younger self, I think I would have liked to have been a little more wise in knowing how to obtain information, but also at the very least, just kind of pressing my mom a little bit more for her information. Because again, I am frustrated, and yeah, I'm frustrated now by the fact that I could have probably done more, once I turned 18 at least. and asked for more information, pressed
Mm.
for more information from her and her agency, but I didn't, and I'm not sure why I didn't. I just didn't. So I think just to, possibly just be a little more persistent and more forthright in asking for information and just questions about,
Right.
okay, well, why was I adopted? What happened? And, kind of go from there, I guess.
So what is there anything else in your search that you found, or is there any other updates that you'd like to give us?
No, that's pretty much it. Again, I would love, just for my mom to know that I'm alive. I'm very curious about my sister's situation. Touch on that. So I
Mm.
learned she was 10 years older than me and she died relatively young. So I'm in my mid 30s. She also apparently passed in her mid 30s. So I guess from her passing as well as my father's passing, I got a little bit of potential family medical history because they both passed in the same way. So I'm like, oh, so, I got that checked out. All's good. But I would have loved to have known her, but also it seemed since we were 10 years apart, I feel like she wasn't aware of me. And I wonder if she knew about me and what that would have been like had I been able to meet her, had she been able to meet me. I'm not even sure she met me because I think a little bit in the documentation of the court record, it said like she was under the care of our grandmother, which would make sense if our parents weren't, fit to do their job and be adequate parents. So I'm very curious about that. But again, I really, lament that I couldn't have met her and that would have been great.
So you said that like she was under the care of your
I
grandparents.
believe
Is
so.
it like is that okay? I mean, I don't know. For me, I think it's just very interesting to find out like all of this information. I feel like it's also quite overwhelming at the same time. When you first like hear all of this, read all of this, it's like there's excitement and then it's just like, "Oh my God, this is so much information." You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think
And
it took a while. Oh, sorry.
no, no, you're good because I was about to say you kind of have to unpack it and it's not something that you can unpack like right away immediately. It's something that takes a little bit of time.
For sure, yeah, and I think I did hit that kinda overwhelmed feeling a little bit later, and the more of the
Mm.
emotional reality of it all kinda hit me a little bit later. So, when I still think about it now, knowing that I know this information, it's just like it's just so shocking, and also, kind of sad at the same time, but again, grateful that,
Right.
I was brought into a much better situation.
Right. And so like you're not curious like again, I know you said that you don't necessarily like want to connect, but you're not curious at all about like any other members of your family or because social media is a really big thing nowadays and it's I'm kind of like wondering if you would like research or try to look online for your remaining family at
Yeah.
all.
I guess I actually did try to look up my mom a little bit actually. I didn't mention that, but it didn't yield anything and again, being in the United States with Russian search engines and social media and all that, I don't really know how to go about doing that, I guess. I don't know the proper techniques or what to look for specifically. I think I just like typed in her name and there was this, a few anything can come up and there was a woman that seemed to match her name that came up, but I'm like, "Oh, well, I this doesn't help because I still don't know if it's her or not. You know what I mean? Since I have no picture or anything like that, and I
Right.
don't know what she did. Right? There was apparently some gynecologist in Russia and who was very popular and well regarded in her practice. I'm like, is this her? But I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I have no idea. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel like I said, I don't feel I need to find her. I'm okay with not. I would just like her to know that her second child is alive and well and she was taken care of.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
one day I'll get to wanting to meet the nephews, but I don't know. I know it sounds weird probably to our listeners and viewers, but I just don't feel that urge to need to meet them. I'm very happy with my life. And I think I told David back in season one, like so much time has passed. So it's like almost like, what's the point?
Well, I mean, well, that I mean, that in itself is a very interesting point. Like you say, like so much time has passed, and there's always that stupid like quote that's super cliche, and is like time heals all. But I guess I mean, is that what happened for you? That like over time, you kind of just were feeling that you don't care as much anymore because it's taking so long to find out this information and stuff like that, or like is it genuinely just more of I have a life here, I'm gonna focus on that.
Yeah, I think it's the latter, I would say. I don't think it's I didn't care. I think it's because I was presented with no information growing up that I didn't have that avenue of needing to look or wanting to look. And maybe very deep down, I was forcing myself not to look, and because I knew I wasn't receiving information from my adoptive family, specifically my mom, that I just kind of gave up in a way. Maybe I just very subconsciously
Mhm.
internally just gave up. I was like, oh, okay, well, oh well, that's how it is. It is what it is, right? And then I just continued on with my life and never really thought much of it until recently, once I started this podcast and the group and all of that. So that's really what kind of brought all of this to the surface.
True. And, so you're part of the podcast, obviously. And I'm actually kind of curious. I don't think I've ever asked you this, but how has working with the podcast like impacted your own feelings about your adoption and your story?
Ooh, that's a good one. I guess it helps solidify my history of being adopted. And I actually really enjoy telling people that I'm part of this podcast, and I tell people every chance I can get, and it's really fun. I'm really enjoying it, and it's nice to finally be surrounded by other adoptees, and I can share my story a bit more. And I like actually having the platform to share my story. Of course, I was nervous for both this interview and when I did it the first time. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Like, oh, should I do this? Should I not? Oh, I don't know. Right. You really kind of go through that mental struggle and turmoil of like, oh, should I do this? Oh, I don't know. But I'm really glad I did. And, like I said, really enjoyed working on the podcast. And I like helping other adoptees be able to tell their story because we know so many of them want to and they have great stories to share. But yeah, I think it's just another layer to my story that I was not expecting. So the most pleasurable, unexpected thing that happened. I never thought I'd be on a podcast.
That's true. And I mean, again, I think all of this is exciting and I'm very happy that you were able to find this information out. I'm so happy that it's almost like that chapter of your life has really closed. Like the door has officially, like you have shut that door completely, where before you were kind of like leaving it a little bit open. So again, for me, I feel very just relieved and happy for you that you can just move on with your life, know what you know, and just continue living your life. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'm asking if this whole experience of just searching and things like that, if it's giving you a newfound perspective on obviously the life that you have here now, and how has it shifted your perspective of where you're at right now?
So I don't think, and it's interesting because I think David was trying to ask this too, but I don't think finding all this information has in any way really drastically changed my day to day life. I
Mhm.
still nothing in terms of my personal life, my career, none of that has been impacted really by my adoption. I would just say obviously
Right.
just the fact of knowing information is significant to me. I'm the type of person who likes to just know information. I don't do well when there are lingering questions in the air that don't get answered. So I think it was just more of the process of trying to see if I could answer these questions and find out this information because I think I was feeling a little like, oh, why can't I? Because so many other people were. I was reading and hearing that so many other people were finding information and also finding their biological family members, which is the whole nother thing, right? And I'm so happy for them, but
Right.
I'm fine. Again, I'm fine with not necessarily doing that. But like you said, perfect metaphor, right? It is. I do feel like the book is almost finished. It might have like 1 or 2 pages left to read. I just want those pictures. Really, at this point, my book will be complete when I get those pictures.
Yeah, make it a photo album, a visual, like a little bit of writing, a little bit of visual, things like that. I mean, I also think it's something interesting that you can tell your children about your story and the struggles that you went through to find out this information. You know what I mean? It adds a whole layer of just resilience to you. So, for me, I think props to you because I don't think I would have personally searched. And that's why I say, like, don't give up. If you don't hear back the first time, keep going. Because if that was me, I would have given up. And for, hearing that you didn't and you were able to obtain this information, I'm really proud of you.
Yeah, and I
Genuinely.
was very excited. Like the first
Yeah.
person I told, obviously, and I shared all this information with my husband, and then I immediately contacted my closest friends. I said, "Hey, I have updates about my adoption," and they were so happy to hear. So I was very pleased and grateful that they were interested in my story as well, and they wanted to hear all the new updates. So it was nice to kind of bring them in on my journey a little bit as well.
Right. And like, so what was your husband's reaction to all of this? Like, I mean, obviously he was really excited for you. And then when you came to that decision of like, I've healed enough. I don't necessarily need to meet them sort of deal. Like, what was his reaction to that? Sometimes it's good to get to hear about like an outside perspective.
Yeah. So honestly, he didn't really like have much of a reaction. I know that might sound terrible to hear, but I think he's just kind
Mm,
of the type of person who he's a great listener, so he was listening to everything I was telling him, but I don't think he wanted to comment or give advice because I think he kind of knew that's not his place and he knew it was my information and my story to share. And he was very happy to hear it and to listen and to have me show him my documents. But what else could he really say, right? Like, oh, great, cool, right? But
true.
he doesn't know the experience, I guess. But yeah, I think it was just more like he was there to listen and, he didn't want to influence my decision on anything. And he was very supportive of me going back to Russia, and we tried, and that's a whole other thing. But yeah, so, he supports my endeavors with my story, but he doesn't do anything to change my mind or to say, oh, you should do this, or have you thought about this? Although I'll admit, he had a little bit of criticism about the court document. He's like, well, that's just one perspective. Maybe it's not totally true. I'm like,
Right.
So I wasn't super pleased to hear that because, like I said, I want to believe it's all true. But I don't
Right.
know. I guess that was the only little bit of, negativity that he brought to it.
Right. And I just, it's always good to hear an outsider perspective, especially when it's someone that you really, really trust. But to kind of close off this episode, now that you've gathered this information, what's next for you? Are you going to be looking for anything else, any other information? Or, is it just more, it's my time, I am Masha, and I am going to continue living my life sort of deal?
Yes, well, the latter will definitely happen. Yes, I'll continue, living and doing what I'm doing. But like I said, I think I would feel more whole and close that circle once I can find some pictures. If I can get any picture, even if it's just one family member, that would be great. So I am on the hunt currently for pictures, and I'm soliciting help for that because I don't really know how to go about doing that. And I think I'm already a little disappointed that I probably won't find anything, but I guess it will be what it is. But other than that, I would love to go to Russia. I think like most of us want to. Obviously, now's not the time, but hopefully one
Right.
day it would be really great to be able to take a trip there, and we'll see if that can happen. So those two things would be my last two, bits of information and experiences that I would like to have to finalize my story.
So to finish it off, what is your piece of advice for all adoptees who are listening to this right now?
I think I would say, I would, say much of what you said, honestly, is yeah, don't give up. You To get the Freedom of Information Act started, you need to have minimal information, use what you have, go from there, keep seeking out information and resources, and just do what you feel comfortable doing, and don't feel guilty about, like you said, not wanting to search for your family or searching for your
Mhm.
family. I mean, people will support you either way, hopefully. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. It's not required, right? Yes, it's a hope, it's a goal, it's a
Right.
dream for many. But like I said, I honestly feel basically 99% confident and comfortable that I don't need to and or want to meet my family. And that's okay. So just do with what you're comfortable. And if you're gonna search, awesome, great, keep at it. And be content wherever you are.
True. Well, thank you for joining us on this episode of Chats with Kat. A special thank you to our guest Masha. Thanks for the story and the update. So stay tuned for another episode of Chats with Kat every other Wednesday on the Voice of Adoptees podcast. And always, always remember, someone somewhere is thinking of you. You are not alone.